Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison with another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the honor and privilege of having Greg Ward from Miami, a very successful PI attorney down in Miami, along with his wife, Jany. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ken. It's great to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, man. And Greg is in one of our elite masterminds. It's called the 8-Figure Mastermind. He's been in it for several years now, and I've watched him really. He already had a successful practice when he joined our mastermind, but he has just really blown the roof out of it. And it's always good to talk to people like this to get in their heads, because they're thinking about things the average lawyer is not thinking about. And so I want to talk about people and training and, how to build a great law firm with you today, because I think that's one of your big deals among others. But tell the people about your journey, about, how you got to where you are now.
Sure. Yeah. And that's, it's a story, and everybody has their own story, first of all. And actually that story is, I think, one of the big keys to, to how big you get and why you're doing what you're doing. But I started off in Baltimore. I grew up, not too far from the city line in Baltimore. And, my family was sort of, I guess, lower middle class or upper lower class. I don't know how you'd spin that, but unfortunately, at an early age, my sister got involved in some drugs, heroin actually, and so that was a tough, situation. Ironically, as I was, I know, and I know have your story as well. I always thought as I was growing up, the problems we had were we were poor, right, and we had no money. Mom was always saying, "There's no money, there's no money," and of course, I realized later that you can have all the money, but if you've got things like drug addiction or alcoholism or anything like that, it can really mess up your life. So, but I kind of want to get out of that situation, right? And so when I started, I said, I'm going to go be a lawyer. And I graduated. I went to University of Baltimore, graduated, top of the class. I was a commencement speaker, and I was checking all these boxes of success, but it wasn't really fulfilling. I was just trying to get away from what I thought was a bad situation. And my sister continued her drug use. She was, I guess, probably 18 when she started using, and then she passed away at the age of 34. And so I was like, I'm out of here. And I got a good job, and then I moved to Miami to work at a big law firm, a big white shoe firm down here. And, it only took a couple of years for me to realize, like, I do not fit in with big defense lawyers. That's not me, man. And I would meet these plaintiffs lawyers, especially some of the greats. I met Irvin Gonzalez, was a friend. Unfortunately, he passed away. And some, Todd Aronovitz, former president of the Florida Bar, some really great, and a bunch of other people. I don't want to, short shift anyone, but I met some of these plaintiffs lawyers, and I was like, these people are really, they're like me, and they're like what I want to be. They're helping people, they're giving back. They're just the gentleman who you would just aspire to be. And so I got this little seed in my head that I started thinking I should be a plaintiff's lawyer. And then I practiced about 5 years at the big firm, and then went out and started my own firm in my garage. And then I brought in some partners there. Couldn't get traction though, because we weren't doing any PI. We were doing commercial litigation, like a billable practice. And then then the storm came, right? And I've talked to you about this story. I know you know it, but I'll share it for the listeners who may not know this. After I had started my own firm and brought in some partners, just everything in my life kind of came unglued at one time. My sister, who was the drug addict, was diagnosed with what turned out to be terminal leukemia. A year after that, my dad was diagnosed with terminal leukemia. He was diagnosed a year later, died a year after that. And as a result of, her and him and his treatment, I was basically living in a hospital room with him for several months. My business started going down, and my marriage at the time, my ex-wife, her parents both had strokes, like all at the same time. She moved to Greece, and then unfortunately she ended up with somebody in another country. And I had a 2-year-old daughter at the time who was 4, I guess, at the time when everything went bad. So all this stuff happened. Basically my business was folding, my family was falling apart. And so I ended up sleeping on a couch in a living room. I basically lost everything. And So I ended up exiting that business, and I had a spiritual conversion at that moment, and this is the point of this whole story, because I tell the story and everybody's like, "Wow, that really sucks. How did you get to be 125 employees and and growing and hundreds of cases a month and everything?" And the truth is that 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I met my wife. Now, she took me to church, and I had a big spiritual experience, and I feel like I heard the voice of God, and it changed my life. And so then that was like the stepping off point, which we can talk about all the pieces after that, but I just wanted to get us all up on the same page, where it's like when I had this, like I was really at the bottom, I had on paper, super lawyers, all that stuff, even back then on paper it was all great, right? Top of the class, book awards, all those things. But in my life was just absolute in the garbage pit. And, and so that's why I say that's where Jesus found me, right? He pulled me out of that place. And so from then on, like everything we've done have really been, centered around our faith and trying to do the right thing for clients. Like all the little pieces have fit together now, and I see it. But at the time, man, it was a tough climb that, off that couch, that was a hard thing.
And so your wife, she's a lawyer too, right?
That's right. She's my lawyer, she's a lawyer, my law partner, and my wife. She passed the bar the same week that we got married, actually. So that was, we were talking about this story the other day. It was like, we had the wedding set, and then she happened to pass the bar that week. So we were really happy that it was like a double win, and then she came back as a partner. So, now it's funny to talk about my wife for a second. So this is tough. I want to give a shout out to the young women who are looking at this podcast, because, and you probably should have my wife on at some point, because she's, my wife's 15 years younger than I am. She's been practicing now for 10 years. But when she started practice, it was hard for her because she was a Spanish immigrant. She walked across the border when she was 14. She had a backpack and her little brother and she was separated from parents or her mom when she crossed the border. They were still doing this stuff back then. It's politics now, but back then they separate the kids. She went to an orphanage or foster care that she had. Her only possession she loved was her necklace, which was stolen from her at the time. At the age of 14, she didn't speak English. And her finally got reunited with her mother and shipped to Miami. And they had a struggle, and she really had a hard time. She got a scholarship to college, thank God. She got into law school, and she realized that being a lawyer for her was empowering. But unfortunately, and this is an indictment of our profession, when she got her bar license, we go to a mediation together. And I think it was like 3 or 4 different mediators that said, "Oh, are you his secretary?" And it would break her heart because she worked so hard to be a lawyer. And I brushed it off for the first 3 or 4 times. I was like, "Oh, it's just this old school, whatever, don't let it bother you." And then it started bothering me. I started thinking, you know what? Because that really, think about this. If you're going into a mediation, right, and you're a young female attorney, maybe has an accent, and the mediator automatically assumes that you're not the lawyer, that puts you in a really bad spot. And and tough for your client and tough for everybody. It's just disrespectful. And God bless her. She said, "You know what? This is going to be my rocket fuel. I am not going to let any of this slow me down. I'm going to recommit myself to representing these people, because I know now what it's like when people don't get taken seriously." And so my wife, she's the heart of the firm, honestly. Like I'm systems and structures and training and all the business stuff. That's all. I got all that, right? But my wife is the one who has the passion and the drive to help our clients. And she's the one who has the real, and she's also the person who goes on TV most. People really connect with her because she's able to tell her story, and it's powerful. We'll talk more about that when we talk about, really scaling your company, about having a great story. But that's her story, and she had to feel that pain. Those are painful lessons are the most valuable ones, I think. So, but yeah, so we're partners now, and we've been partners since we've been married, and it's a great partnership because we just have 2 totally different skill sets, as Ken, you've met her, so you know what she's like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. She's it's a good partner to have, though. You complement each other in so many ways.
For sure.
Your strengths, her strengths are different. That's what you want in a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
To balance it out.
Right.
So Tim, you all got married, and I guess you had already started a law firm, and she came back. She was a partner. Mm-hmm. What were you doing? How were you getting cases? What were you doing? How were you doing?
So it's funny, right? So we had this. We started. We were on Brickell Avenue, which, for those of you who know Miami, Brickell Avenue is the main financial center of Miami, and we were subletting office space. We had a little tiny closet office, and I had the nicer exterior office, and we could share conference room space and everything. And it was expensive. I mean, the parking was more expensive than my rent was in Miami Lakes. So it was expensive. And I was doing commercial litigation and insurance coverage work, right? So Florida has some bad faith practice and first party insurance coverage. I was doing that kind of work, but for condo associations, I think it was more of a higher end type practice, construction disputes, that kind of stuff, all the insurance coverage issues related to that. And my wife was very passionate about helping immigrants, right, and Spanish speakers. And I had a similar passion in the sense that I always wanted to help the little guy. So she came in one day and said, I want to do PI. And I was like, okay, go do your PI practice, and maybe I was dismissive. I was like, go do your little PI practice. Because I was a white shoe, commercial litigator, partnership disputes, multi-million-dollar insurance coverage disputes. And there's a couple other stories that go in here that are probably outside the scope of the podcast. But the long story short is that she started doing radio advertising for personal injury. And the first case we got in, we settled for, it was a $50,000 tender. And we got it with like one letter. And it was like a $16,000 fee. And she came in with a check. And I was like, wait, you did what? Now I reviewed the demand, but I never expected them just to send us a check. Like I had a broken nose, right? I'd never done that kind of PI work. And so I was like, are you kidding me? Like, cause I'm billing work. I was $400 an hour. Like, but to bill enough hours as you're running a firm and trying to bill for those hours and collect, right? Cause nobody wanted to pay. It's like the amount of work I had to do to get paid $16,000 and you just did this in that time. I'm like, take all that money and put it back into a bigger advertising contract. We're all in here. Right. And so, and we did that. And I said, and by the way, spend even more, because instead of taking that $16,000 over 3 months, do it in a month and let's see what we get. And so it started coming in, hot, right? It was like 3, 5, 10, 20, 25, 30, 50, right? And this is of course over a year to 2 years. And we started strategically, we were really trying to trace where every case came from. And we were doing the signups ourselves. We were driving out, late at night. Like it was just us. And so she'd go sign up all the clients and so it just took off. And I attribute most of that to our faith, because there were a lot of challenges along the way where we just had to just say, you know what, this is what God has called us to do. And I believed it. And so there's a lot of challenges that we had that we just had to push through, knowing that God has our back and he's always been faithful for us. And as a result, and about our giving too, and that we're always wanting to give back. I believe that's part of the equation of what God has for us, is that we want to give back. We want to give back to lawyers out there who are just starting out. Honestly, it's I envy the young guys, because for them, it's all hope and upside. Me, I kind of already know where I'm at, right? Like, and I'll be like, I can scale and I'm going to go to another jurisdiction. Am I going to go from, 500 to 1,000 cases? I don't know, right? I think I am, but you don't know. But for the young guys, man, it's all hope. It's all excitement. It's all like, let's do this thing. There's some problems. I remember the first $100,000 tender we got. I shut down the office for like 3 days. I was like, maybe even a week, honest to God, maybe a week, like $33,000. I was like, we are taking off a week, because that was so much money for me at the time. I was like, my gosh, and so I was excited. I think we had probably maybe 3 or 4 staff at that point, or I think it was 4 of us all together, maybe 5. And it's like, we're taking off a week paid, guys, you did such a great job. $100,000, and then you get the $1 million tender. The first $1 million tender, you take off a couple of days. And then the $10 million tender, you're in the office the next day, and that's the reality of it. But, you shouldn't be for the money, but the truth is you celebrate your milestones. And that first $100,000 tender was a big milestone. And so for the young guys who are out there, and young women too, like I think, women are so great at this profession. They bring so much to the table. I encourage more women to go and start their own firms. It's all upside and hope for you guys at this point. So I'm a little jealous of that. So
are you going to take off a month when you, or you might have already collected, and you might not can talk about it? I know you talked about it, Mastermind, that big case.
Can't talk about it yet. We'll talk about it in the future.
Okay.
We signed the confidentiality agreement today, but I haven't gotten the money yet. So I want to make sure we're all good. But yeah, I'm not going to take off a month. In fact, when we settled a big case, I went to work the next day. I did. But the truth is that, Ken, I'll tell you, I do this now because I love people. I love giving back. It gets to some point, and I'm sure there's guys out there who are like, Greg is so full of baloney. But the truth is, when you get to a certain point, you're like, I would do this for free. I would. because I love helping people. I love giving back to the clients. The people who we represent, man, they're like, nobody's standing up for them, and for us, like I spoke at the Litify conference recently. Can I say that on your Litify conference?
Yeah.
And I said, listen, so here's the deal, man. I read the Bible, right? Like I went I had a health crisis a couple of years ago, and I went back, I read the Bible again, and I was like, you know what? I believe that God has called us as plaintiffs lawyers to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. I believe we have a ecclesiastical calling. Like this is a like we're ministers, and on top of that, I believe that, that we have the responsibility to fight for every dollar for our clients. And a lot of us, we fool around with our Rolexes, we drive our Mercedes or whatever it is, and we forget that a dollar matters to our clients. And, when I was sleeping on the couch, a dollar mattered to me. When my wife was in college and she couldn't afford a Diet Coke, a penny mattered to her. And so we got to remember, like for us, I had a young attorney who was negotiating a settlement the other day, and he's like, the adjuster's so reasonable, it's we're going to take this settlement. And the paralegal was in the call with him, and she came into my office. She goes, he's going to take this settlement for this case. And she told me the facts of the case and the injuries and stuff. And I said, no. Oh, and the paralegal said, I know the adjuster's got more money. And I said, you know what? Let me talk to the attorney, put it on. But they were doing a phone settlement conference. Attorney came in, I gave him the same speech I just gave you. I said, listen, man, every dollar matters. And they got like $500 more for the client, and that matters to that client. It was only like a $4,000 or $5,000 settlement, but it was $500 really matters to that client. And we lose sight of that. And so that kind of gets me into what we really want to talk about. I know you want to talk about systems and processes and training and things like that, we have a real responsibility to make sure that our lawyers under us and that we are doing the best we can for our clients. And it's easy to lose sight, man, because you can see I'm in Miami. I'm on the beach. I got this place here. I could go down and sit on the beach today. I don't need to do this, but I have a responsibility to my clients to make sure, and to my team to make sure they're doing the best for them and for the clients. And we take that seriously. So if you wanted to, ask me step one, besides my faith, we have a very serious job. We got to take it seriously. And a dollar matters to most of our clients. $1 matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And the deal is, you were talking about 4 or 5, but now you got 125 people. How many lawyers?
Yeah, 135 people. I think 12 or 14 lawyers. The way we do it is a little different. We have the regular lawyers, and we have some contract lawyers, and I co-counsel a lot of my cases with outside firms. If I get into a big case, I'll usually bring in an outside trial lawyer. I don't try the cases anymore. I could, and I may going forward if I ever have to, but I want to make sure my lawyers who are in my litigation department are getting trained. So I bring in some of the very best lawyers around town for them to co-counsel, and I'll split my fee just fine. I don't mind doing it. I do think that sometimes we end up with less money in our pocket, but I don't care because my lawyers are getting trained. We're getting the best result for the client, and God is going to bless us if we do the right thing. And so we keep doing that. So when I say that, it's a little bit fuzzy because we have a lot of folks who are co-counseling with us on some of the bigger cases. And then we have some contract lawyers as well. Hiring lawyers, big challenge, right? We can talk about that. Like, how do we get good lawyers and people who are sharing our values? That's always a challenge, I'm under-lawyered right now. I would like to have more lawyers in my office. In fact, if anybody's listening and they don't care about running their own firm and they want to move to Miami and work at a law firm that loves you, call me, please.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a problem all over the country right now. As we talk about it, the masterminds, lawyers are having trouble finding other lawyers. The staffing issue, I think, is getting better, and I think with the offshore stuff, which you're big on offshore, right? I mean,
yeah. I was not big when we started. When we started saying offshore, I was like, "You're crazy! Don't do it. It's absolutely insane." And I have had a conversion in that area as well. We couldn't have survived through COVID if we didn't offshore for some. And that's when we started doing it. And honestly, COVID was a terrible curse on us, but it also it carried with it a seed of equal and greater opportunity. I think Napoleon Hill said that. Yeah. Every bad thing carries with a seed of equal or greater opportunity. And with COVID, it forced us to go remote. It forced us to go digital. I mean, I remember I was signing every case in person, right? I had these guys would go out and sign up the cases in person. Nobody wants to see you in person now. And COVID's over, man. Let's be honest, right? Like, it's political, I guess, still politicized. But the truth is, I see people wearing masks. I live in Florida. I was conservative about COVID. I'm like, I'm scared of getting it. I had it twice, no symptoms. But at the same time, it has changed, the landscape of our business. Nobody wants to see us in person anymore. And in fact, I would go so far as to say the millennials would really rather just text us. So we've integrated texting in our case management software because they don't even want to talk to you. They're like,
Yeah.
I hired you. I don't need to talk to you. I'm going to text you. And we give automatic text messages for different stages of the case, explaining things so that, everybody keeps up to speed on it. But, the law is changing fast. Well, I should say society is changing fast.
Yeah.
We got to keep up,
So how
offshore,
many offshore you got now out of the
we have 50 offshore. Of the 125, 50 of those people are offshore. It may be more, maybe 55. I looked at our head count yesterday. It was 135, and I think 55 of those are offshore. I would like to have a 60-40 mix of offshore, which means the miles of my people will be offshore. There are so many good reasons for that. And we can talk about training and systems and processes in a minute, because you need that in order to have people offshore. But I would like to have my managers, attorneys, and accounting domestically here in Miami, right? I want to make sure that because that's my managers are really what drive the culture. My attorneys I need constant interaction with them so we can make sure that they're doing the best for the clients and they're supervising a bunch of people. And then the accounting, of course, obviously you don't want to have your checks written somewhere else. You don't have anybody having bank account information offshore. So with that, that's about 40% of my staff. And I think marketing would be here, but I'm starting to split marketing too. I've got offshore marketing people now doing Instagram stuff and all that stuff. That's actually a pretty good fit for them. But my marketing manager and a couple of my key people are here domestically as well. So yeah, but the key to that, I don't want to keep rambling, but the key to that is definitely hiring processes, your systems and processes for your firm, and your training. Like you gotta, if you don't have somebody that they're right there next to you that you can just immediately check in with them, what are the olden days, Ken, right? We would have pods, right? We have people sitting out there at cubicles and, you leave your door open, you listen to what they're saying, right?
Yeah.
Now
you just throw them in and say, all right, shadow this person for a week. And then throw them in the swimming pool where you just sink or swim.
Right. And we used to have cubicles. In fact, we didn't give lawyers offices. We put them all in cubicles. My wife would sit in the middle of the office. We had about 20 cubicles. And she would sit right in the middle and she'd listen to what everybody was doing. She'd just go around and she'd rotate around different cubicles and listen to what people were saying. And you learn a lot about your firm that way. You really do. And you find out a lot of crazy stuff people are doing that you're like, where did you learn that from? And I mean, lawyers too, they're like, well, how do you come up with that? That's not the right thing to say or do, you got to be in your firm at that size. And then as you can't be in it to that level, you've got to come up with systems and processes, keep the guardrails on. And make sure that you're having things like call audits and, basically, you've got to do at least weekly trainings on any area. If you do the call audits, you'll see where your weaknesses are. You've got to do constant training in that to make sure.
Call audits, you're talking about the calls to the clients, or you're talking about intakes, or both?
You should audit every single phone call in your office, every type, right? So our managers, for example, this is one of the systems and processes. So we have it set up, right? We have our sign up guys are in a different company. They're not with us, right? It's a different investigators. And we call them investigators. Our intake department, right? We call our intake department, what you call your intake department is really our medical management department, right? You come in, you've got the intake people, they're doing the property damage, they're doing the medical management, the calls, identifying, and we're obviously triaging the early demands where it's, there's a significant injury. If it's a really significant injury, it goes straight to my high end department because we're preserving evidence and all that kind of stuff. We've got to, if it's a truck and there's a hospital or something, we've got to go out and get the videos and, all that stuff. So we were screening all those calls when they come in to see where it goes. But, your typical, rear ender with no hospital treatment or something is going to go through my what I call my intake department, which is medical management, and they're going to take care of the property damage and all that. Now the managers, and then I have my production department where they write demands, et cetera. We can go through this more if you want, but basically every phone call, my manager has a responsibility to audit a certain number of phone calls per week, right? And we say the categories of what they want to audit. If it's for a new person, they have to audit more than the more trained people, but they have responsibilities to audit every kind of call because you just don't know what stuff will slip in to, their conversation, right? Yeah, and by the way, we will have scripts, we'll have outlines, we'll have, talking points depending on the type of conversation. If it's attorneys, they don't usually, they usually, they know what to say, but you got to listen to the attorney calls too, and see what they said in the negotiation, what's in it. And especially if you have something that goes wrong. So this is where, where we come back. If you have something where a client is dissatisfied, I say go wrong. What I mean is the client is dissatisfied. Right. I go back and by the way, in Florida, we have you have to get consent for all calls. So we got the disclaimers in every call. We have to audit the calls and make sure they're saying all calls are recorded, right? So that's number one, is all calls are recorded. Even when they call out, it's all calls are recorded, right? So we do that to put clients on notice that they're being recorded. And so we have these recorded calls. If you have a client who's dissatisfied, one, we have the protection of knowing what was said. Now, I'll be honest with you, if we messed up something, like I'll own it. I'll be like, hey, listen, client, we did mess this up. I'm sorry. And we'll try and figure out a way to make it right by the client. So we'll definitely audit clients if they're upset, but more importantly, we just need to audit on a day-to-day basis. And part of their training is having call audits. And another little piece of advice I have for all you guys, I think this is super important. You should listen to some calls too.
Yeah. And
then when you listen to some calls, always comment on the calls that you listen to. So maybe I listen to 1 or 2 calls a week, maybe, right? Especially if there's a problem. If there's a problem, I'm usually dealing with a problem. We have our weekly huddles, which, I don't know if you guys know what those are or not, but we have a top-down firm huddle every week on Mondays. And then we have all hands on deck huddle, I should say. In that all hands on deck huddle, I will mention something about the call that I reviewed with the person I reviewed, if it's either to compliment or to give some feedback or whatever it is, so that everybody in my organization knows that I also am auditing the calls, because that's about accountability. And so they need to know that. And I tell my managers, I said, every call you listen to, you should give some feedback on, so they know you're listening, because that will keep people on, with guardrails on the right track.
Yeah, always said people respect what you inspect.
Correct. Right. And what's Reagan said, trust but verify, right? That's the other thing, right? So trust but verify. And so that's really, really useful. My wife is even better at this than I am, because she's really passionate about this. So she listens to a lot more calls, particularly the initial call where they're talking to the client, because, you sign up the case, but, maybe they're with you, maybe they're not. In Florida, we got a lot of people who are paying money we got runners and everything. So maybe they're locked in, but somebody shows up at their door with $1,000 check, they're going to be like, screw Greg and Hani. Right. So we got to be like, we have to show them, hey, we're good for this reason. And this is how we handle things. And these are our testimonials. And this is what our clients say. And check out our almost 2,000 5-star Google reviews online. So this reaffirmation, the selling continues throughout the process. Right. So we want to make sure that that's getting out there if you have a, client. And if we lose a client, we're looking at those calls. What happened here? Right. If we have a discharge in the first couple of weeks, we're going to look at that and see what went wrong there.
So you systematize the way you hire people. And so what's the process? I mean, is your process fast tracked, or does it take a while for somebody to get into your law firm? Like I'm saying, do you just looking at their efficiencies or their skill set, or are you looking at their character, their morals, their core values? What are you looking for?
So what we do is it is fast track, but we also do a lot when we fast track it, right? So I'll tell you our process as it stands now, and then I'll tell you where we're going with this. So right now, as it stands, we have some sources, Indeed, LinkedIn, other places will post a job ad. We will get inundated with resumes, and most of them don't even know what they're applying for. Now, I had originally wanted to have jump through some hoops even to get your resume in. And that was very difficult. So I'd have, on Indeed, I would say call for instructions on how to apply. And then I give an email address that they had to apply to. And basically we didn't get anybody who followed that instruction. The goal, of course, is to see if they can follow directions. But I think that, they also get so used to just clicking a button to submit a resume. So we have them submit a resume. There's a basic review to see if they have the very, very basic skill set. I have a recruiter in-house. There is a basic review to see if they, pass the basic smell test. And then the recruiter will do a phone interview, which is an important interview, right? And so with the recruiter, she will ask certain questions. Now, at this point, it's important to say that we have 7 core values in my firm: service to the clients, service to the team, service to our community, accountability, leadership, loyalty, and faith, right? And so we try and see if we can get a couple of stories. The service ones are the most important to me. To see if we get a couple of stories, see if they have some way to back up that they really are committed to customer service or service to a team or organization, right? One of those two really is good. Or if they've done a lot of volunteer work, that's good for me too, because I know they have a heart to serve. So we'll try and get through that in the phone interview. And then if they pass the phone interview, we we use real talent hiring with Jay Henderson. So we'll send them a Henderson test. And, ideally, they'll take that test and then we'll have him evaluate the fit with the team that we're considering them for. I did tell my team the other day, I said, listen, we actually do consider everybody for every open position, right? Just because they applied for an intake person or just because they applied for accounting does not necessarily mean that that's the best fit. They may just have seen that one ad. So when we do this with Jay and we do talk to them about what other things they would be interested in, we always look. I will tell you that I've gotten some really good people in other departments. Like I've had people who signed up for intake, let's say. You got to be really kind of extroverted. You got to be really, good at that. But they really have a great accounting profile, that they're the admin, and I'm like, hey, would you consider a bookkeeping job? And we've gotten great fits with that. They just, because sometimes people don't know what they want. They think they know what they want, but they don't. And so we look at that and we look at how they fit with certain teams. And we have every one of my organizations been tested so we can see how we fit together under that. And then, once we get past that initial test, we'll review, we'll talk about it with Jay. The manager will have a call with Jay, or I'll have a call with Jay if it's a senior level person. Then we bring them in for an interview. As you know, real talent hiring has an interview guideline. And so we go through with the interviews. And I'm just trying to look for those core values to see how closely they align and track with our core values. And if I can see if they really do. I also like top grading. I think it's good, but man, the top grading process is just arduous. It's like, yeah. I'll do the reference checks, but as far as like the top grading interviews and all that stuff, I had to streamline it. So when I say it's streamlined, it's, I don't have time to have them fill out a 3-hour, resume / whatever it is, but I will try and zero in on the 1 or 2 things that I think could be a red flag in the interviews.
Right.
And is guided by the core values. And that to say the most important thing we do is, align with our core values. That is really it. That is it. Because I'll tell you, if people align with our core values, there will be a place for them in our organization. And so that, and that's client support, which we call reception, all the way up to, senior attorneys. If I can see that they've got the demonstrable alignment with our most important core values, that they're going to fit in fine here, So that's basically it. So then after that, we'll do negotiations over salary and then and issue them an offer. One other little piece, I try and avoid hiring people from other firms, law firms, because the way we do things is just so different than everybody else. I don't want anybody to come in with a preconceived idea about what the practice is. So we do train people. I would prefer to have an attorney who has no PI experience, but a willingness to learn, a desire to learn and be coachable. If they're coachable, we can get them up to speed within 6 months to a year, and they will be really, really valuable team player.
How about your staff? What do you do? What kind of training do you? You said you had a full-time recruiter. Do you have a full-time trainer or?
So that's step 2, right? So that's where we're at right now. So there was an article in the Harvard Business Review about separating HR leadership from admin. And I literally have a call in another hour to talk to a recruiter, an outside headhunter, to talk about hiring an HR leadership position. And what this is this is a person who sits at the board of directors level, for lack of a better term. It's really at the C-suite level, somebody who has absolute oversight for the development of the human resources that you have, or I think Vernon Harnish calls it human capital. I forget what his term is for it, but that's basically the term. And that is that you make sure that everybody has a career plan and a growth plan. And so we don't have that right now. We have KPIs, we have deliverables, we have training, we have some online training platforms we use and to train people. And we do a lot of one-on-one training when somebody comes in.
Which software do you use? Training?
No, it was, gosh, I forget the name of it, but and I gave it away at the last mastermind group too. I can't remember the name of it, but maybe I can email it to you, put it in the notes here, but it's,
but
I keep thinking of
Trainual, and then there's different ones. But that's cool.
Yeah. So we have that online training with some module. By the way, we started doing our online training during COVID. Like everything was shut down. So what do we do?
Right.
You know, I got a video studio in my office. So I said, hey, listen, let's go make some training videos. My wife and I basically we were shut down for like a month. I know we had a cameraman, and it was me, my wife, and a cameraman. And we would write the scripts at night. We do the training during the day, and that's it. And then of course we had the problem with that is, if you do long training videos, you always have to edit them. So you want to do a series of short training videos that will save you guys a lot of time. Maybe do like a 3 to 5 minute training video and do modules, so you can just slide it out. So you don't, because if you do a 30-minute video, 10 things are going to change in a year. So you want to make sure you just, you just change what you need to change.
Right. That's, and I think you got to do that when you're growing like you're growing, because, I mean, how many employees you have 2 or 3 years ago, Greg?
So I had applied for EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, 5 years ago, and I think I had something like 25 employees, maybe less. And even 2 or 3 years ago, I mean, we were hiring through COVID. I knew we had to build our infrastructure, and we had to build it up. So I want to say, I have the numbers written down somewhere because I do my revenue per employee. I would say probably 60 employees 3 years ago, maybe, or 2 years ago. I mean, we've more than doubled in the last 2 years. So with that, and I'm considering doubling in 3 years going forward. I don't see how we can hit where I want to be if we don't double, because it takes about 6 months to a year to train somebody. So we've got to have the headcount in place and train, and then you're gonna have some attrition. So you really got to hire ahead of your needs. So, my revenue forecasts are up to 5 years out. I've got to have the team in place 3 years out. So we're actively looking now to be able to build that team out.
So you said something interesting, and I remember this when Vern Harsh was at he came to one of our master. I don't know if you were at that or not, down in Key West.
Key West, yeah. That's where I met Vern actually for the first time. I've been a big fan, but I never met him in person. And now I love I coach with Daniel Marcos. I talk to Vern probably once every few months. So it's good. He's a great guy.
He is, and he was interesting. You were talking about revenue per employee, and I think it's something no law firms talk about. But I mean, I've done it sometimes at some of the masterminds. Let's take a survey, and it was interesting because they'd have some that was 150,000 per employee, and we had some firms that were $600,000 per employee. It was all over.
Well, and if you look at Vern's metrics, it should be $1 million revenue per employee. Like he's like the Fortune 500 companies are like $1 million per person. So it just blows my mind. I'm like, holy cow, I'd love to get there. But the revenue per employee is important. And by the way, when I did the scaling up system or coaching through the online platform, the Growth Institute, and right. I did a whole class on it, and I need to go back and do it again. But using the the functional accountability chart, I want to say, or the person accountability chart, I can't remember which one. But what you basically do is you take a line item for your balance sheet and you put somebody who's responsible for it, and that, like, what you end up with is about 10 different functions for your company, 10 different key metrics to be successful. And there's one person fighting for that. And sometimes those things are at odds. So for example, revenue per employee, every manager is understaffed according to them, right? They all say, I'm understaffed. But if you go back and say revenue per employee, well, wait a minute. We made less per person this year than we did last year. What are you doing differently? Right? That's objective data you have to dispute the fact that everybody who says they're understaffed are understaffed, right? Now, for me, I changed my systems and processes. So there are a lot more things we're doing to document that we didn't do before. So that does require more effort, right? And more labor, but it's not 50% more, right? And so you look at this and then you go back over 3 to 5 years and you see, even as your revenue per employee trending up or down, if it's trending down, you have inefficiencies. Right. And there's some excuses or some explanations. If you merge with another firm, you're going to have inefficiencies. Right. If you grew too fast, you could have inefficiencies because you can't get people trained fast enough. So you have those, and your manager being, distracted trying to train instead of driving production on the people who know what they're supposed to be doing. So there's a dozen reasons, but you just need to look for the trend. Is it going up or down?
And I think another thing too, I think the bigger you get, it actually gets much harder to keep your overhead in check.
Can you say that again? It's true.
No, I mean, it really does. I mean, once you get over 10, 12 million, 15 million, it becomes very complicated. And you would think it's counterintuitive, because you would think, just common sense is, if you're getting bigger, then you got you ain't got one HR department or whatever. So you should be, your overhead should go down, not up, right?
Yeah, you should have economies of scale, right? You should have something where, I think that's the term, right? Where it's like you get more efficiency with less work. And the truth is, like, and I've seen this diagram where it's like, when you have 2 employees, you can only have one problem, right? But when you have 4 employees, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 problems, right? And then when you have 8 employees, you can have, what I mean? It's like you have these, and then you have these, and then you have these. And so the layer of problems goes up exponentially as you add headcount, and the inefficiencies come in. And that's why you have to be so focused on systems and processes, because you've got to bring some objective, verifiable, accountability tools into that mix, so that you can at least look at the data. And I'll say this other thing. Most of us, myself included, manage with our guts. And that's okay when you're maybe 10 people or 15 people or 20 people even, because you're having a personal relationship with everybody in the organization. But when you get over 50, 75 people, and Vern talks about the valleys of death at different stages of growth in his book, Scaling Up. There is this point where you can no longer go by your gut, and politics comes in, and you have your buddies who you like. Man, I really like this guy. And one of the things we were speaking about before we came online, I'll just share this. I spoke at your PILMA last year, and I said, the most important decision you need to make before you grow is, do you have the faith to do it? You've got to get your faith straightened out. Why is that? Because growth brings with it a whole host of problems and storms and anxiety and frustration. And when I tell people that you will lose your friends, probably all of your friends, when you get over, as you say, Ken, 10 million, that's when people started losing friends, right? In fact, Daniel Marcos said today that he met a billionaire coach, and the billionaire coach said the biggest problem that billionaires have is they don't know who their real friends are, because on the way to $1 billion, they hired a bunch of friends, right? Everybody they're friends with, they pay something. And so they get to $1 billion and like, who's loyal to me and who just wants the money? And so it's a similar thing. When you get over 10 million, I'm sure you've experienced this too. It's like, you start paying people for stuff, you do business with your friends, and then all of a sudden you start tracking even higher, and maybe they're not on the same growth curve or whatever. And so I can just tell you that in the last, 10 years, I've lost a lot of friends. I lost more friends than I've gained. And I don't think have I changed? Yeah, I've changed, but I'm very demanding with what, I consider appropriate. And I'm pushing myself to grow and drive and all that stuff. And, if you're going to be a friend and a vendor, you gotta grow too. And that's tough. So, it's loneliness, and maybe it's me, maybe I am a jerk. I don't think I am, but maybe I am,
I don't think you are. I know jerks when I see them, and you're not a jerk. I promise you.
Well, thank you for saying that. But at the same time, it's like, I'm also reflecting on myself. Like, am I being too harsh in this situation? Am I too, like, I had a manager who left it. I don't lose a lot of people at the managerial level. And she said to one of my other managers, she's like, she's only with it for 6 months. They are just absolutely crazy about their clients. Like, they are just absolutely obsessed with providing great customer service, and it's too much. She said it was too much. And I was like, and so my manager reports this back, and I'm like, well, God bless her. Right. Okay, I'm guilty, right? That like, I care about my clients because I see the client who's the mom who's losing her house. Do I care about that woman? Yes, I do. And that's why we put our client service first. But the truth is that, and by the way, ironically, this woman, I won't say who it is, she got in a car accident a week after she left. She hired us. Right? Of course, because she knows, like, you're complaining out the door that we're too fanatical about how we treat our clients. But at the same time, let me tell you, we got carriers, people and families who hire us because they know what we're going to do our very best for them no matter what. And so I think that's, I consider it a badge of honor, but it does make things lonely because there's a lot of guys who are like, well, hey, hook a brother up, or, you're being too demanding. And I can't compromise on that. I have to be dedicated to success and success for our clients.
Yeah. Well, you definitely are successful. There's no doubt about it, man. I mean, I've seen you, like I said, when you joined the mastermind, you were already successful, and I've just seen you like skyrocket. I mean, it's just it's like a snowball going down a mountain. You know, it's just keep building speed and size. You know what I mean?
Feels like, well, sometimes I feel like I'm rolling down the mountain in a snowball for sure. Cause I'm like, you know, oh, where did that come from? But it's been good. And COVID slowed us down, but we use that time to build infrastructure. And, you know, that's when we changed our case management software and did some other things. It's like, as I say to the young lawyers out there and maybe some older lawyers who, you know, who are looking at this, what should I do? Let me tell you, every bad thing is an opportunity for you to improve. You can do it. Man, if I did it, you definitely can do it. Everybody can do it, but it takes a huge sacrifice. Now, for me, that sacrifice is not a real sacrifice because I feel like God has asked me to do this. This is my calling in life. So whatever I give up to do this, I'm blessed because, you know, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But please don't do it for the money. Don't. I mean, you can only buy so many Rolexes. The money will come. If you give good service, the money will come. You know, that doesn't mean be a wussy. Yeah, that doesn't mean be a wussy, right? It doesn't mean, you know, don't charge, right? But the money will come if you're committed to service and given a great service and put the clients first. It will come, but don't do it for the money, please, 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 because you'll never make enough. It will never be enough. And the pain of losing relationships and friends and, you know, some of that, like, I don't miss any of my kids' soccer games or anything like that. Like I'm at a point where I can do what I want to do, but the truth is that, you know, you're gonna have to make some painful choices about who to continue to associate with, like, you know, how you spend your day, diet, exercise, like all that stuff, man. Like you got to dial that stuff in to get, you know, big. You got to be 100% committed to, you know, being the best, you know, instrument that you can be. Yep. Right. So don't do it for the money. It's not enough. But man, if you love people and you love service, God, we're in a great business for that, man. We can help so many people. We can make such a big difference. So, you know, I hope this reaches some people.
It will.
You know,
it will.
It's a privilege to be able to be with you. Ken, I want to give a plug for the 8-Figure group and all the PILMA groups. I've been in a lot of groups, a lot of masterminds. I consider the PILMA organization the best organization I'm in. I think, you know, the people who share, they share openly. We all have the same problems. We all have the same struggles. When you're over 8 figures, like, man, if you sit in that room, it's just a different slice of that pie. We're all talking about the same problems right now, people, right? But we'll figure it out and we'll, you know, hopefully make the legal profession better. We'll raise the bar for everybody, but it's a great privilege. And PILMA has been really, it's the one organization that I've been in has consistently delivered. And I never walk out of a PILMA meeting thinking, well, that was a waste. And never. I always am like, wow, that's really great. And at all levels, because I've talked at some of your other conferences, you know, about different topics. So,
well, I appreciate that because, you know, there's a lot of people out there, you know, we were the first to do this, but there's, you know, and I welcome competition just like I did when I practiced law. It used to drive, you know, my people crazy. Oh, they're just spending more money. Don't worry about them. It's good to know what your competitors are doing, but don't let it keep you up at night. I mean, you got to do what you got to do, you know, and just do the best you can and give value. And like you said, you do all that and you're going to be okay. You know, you treat you know, I mean, I think the thing about it is that I don't do this for money. I like the money. Don't get me wrong. I don't hate money, but my number one thing is I love it, man. I enjoy helping other lawyers. It's it gives me purpose. I feel get fulfillment out of it, you know, just like I did when I practiced law. But
and you know, you raised one other thing. I want to say one other thing. I want to circle back to something I said at the beginning. Know your story, right? Know why you're doing this. And this is something you're really good at, Ken, is you know why you're doing this because you love to help people. And that is authentic you. I've never had a question you haven't tried to answer the best you can. I've never had, you know, anything where you have pulled away or not given 100% because you're committed to this. And I know that because I now know your story, and your story is what drives you, you know, like what experiences you've had. And so what I want to say to the younger attorneys out there, and maybe some of the folks who may be trying to figure out if this is really for them, because we all go through those crises too, like know what your story is. Like know, and by the way, your story then drives how you sell. Like what, you know, what your proposition, your value proposition to your clients is framed by your story. You know, a compelling story probably isn't my parents were rich, I want to be rich, so I became a lawyer. That's probably a bad story. You may want to come up with other struggles you've had in your life, right? But when you look back on your life, all of us have had struggles, man. I look at Mike Morse, for example, the fireproof guy, I heard his story. I was like, man, he's got some struggles. Like the great trial lawyers usually have some pretty big struggles they've overcome. And it really is remarkable how similar a lot of our trajectories are. But, know what your story is. And then, and know what your values are, your core values are, and then build your marketing around that. That's the other thing. We're talking about marketing for a second. Like my wife is an immigrant who struggled. When she says to the clients, I know that every dollar matters to you, and we're going to fight our best to get you the most compensation that you're entitled to under the law. Like she can say it and they believe it, right? And when I said it just now, I was saying it like I was talking to a client. You believe when I say that. I really mean that. Like I'm going to stay up at night worrying about your case. And your case may only be $1,000 case, but I'm going to worry about it, make sure you got the best result. So know what your story is. And that drives your marketing. But more importantly, it allows you to be authentic with your clients and the other people in your life so they know what you stand for. Because man, nowadays, God, nobody stands for anything. Everybody's like in the wind, and somebody's got to stand for something. I stand for my faith in God. I stand for the United States of America. God bless America, man. We live in the best country in the world. Thank God. Plaintiffs lawyers make it one of the best countries in the world. Thank God. And we do a great, noble thing here. And so, I just want to encourage other people out there to just do the best that they can do and hopefully be inspired, because we have a great opportunity to serve here and make a difference in people's lives. And it may not always be, you're not going to be getting the big shout out at the end of the movie or whatever. But the truth is that you can make a difference in somebody's life right now that will change the trajectory of their life. And as long as you don't care about the credit for that, you're going to be amazing. So
good job, man. Great interview. Great advice. I hope you and your family have a great Christmas, and I'll see you in January. You're going to speak for me at the National Trial Lawyers.
Yes, sir, I will.
I've got a little morning section that's just for PILMA, and so I wanted you to speak because you give a good message, and people like to hear from people that are successful. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I already started working on that speech. Actually, I gave a dry run of it the other day in my huddle. So I started giving the outline points. So I'm already working on it.
Right. Good deal. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right. Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.